guys, I'm back. My name is Madi. I am on a journey to open up a nonprofit. Sorry it's been a while since I made a video, but life is really hectic. I have 4 kids and 2 of their birthdays just passed by. There were also a few school events that I had to go to. I was really sick for like 2 weeks and life is just crazy, but I'm back. And in this video I want to talk more about that missionary trip that I took, which really sparked that desire for me to start as a nonprofit. But before I get to this trip and more of that story, I feel like I have to give a little background information about my childhood, because it all kind of comes together and adds to the whole reason why I have the desire to start the nonprofit. So I was born in the Bronx. I lived there for the first 2 years of my life, but around the age of 2, my parents, they ended up getting a divorce and my mom became a single mom. My dad kind of like stepped out of the picture and she couldn't really handle, I guess, taking care of me and working without any support here in the United States. So she made the decision to send me to live in Honduras with my grandparents. That's actually a very common part of our culture, Latin America culture, that a lot of the parents come to the United States, they work, they send money to Honduras or whatever country they're from, and the grandparents usually end up raising the children. So that was what happened to me and my sister as well. I have an older sister. We went to Honduras, we lived there with my grandparents, but unfortunately, part of the culture is also raising the kids in a very unhealthy environment. I lived in Honduras from the age of 2 to 9, and I lived under like physical, verbal, and emotional abuse, unfortunately. It's just how a lot of the kids were raised there. And depending on how you were raised, especially if you were raised in an abusive household, it really determines a lot of your behaviors as an adult, and how you are able to form relationships, whether you trust people or not. So it affects you as an adult in several ways. And that was also my case. As a young adult, there were a lot of effects of abusive childhood that I kind of had to like deal with. But anyways, that's just a little bit of my childhood. Let's fast forward to 2022. Where I was going through a divorce. Like, I was going through a separation. My husband at that time and we were just really not seeing eye to eye. I had just given birth to my youngest one. I gave birth to him in 2020, and this was like 2021, 2022. I was going through a really bad, like, emotional, just a bad time. On top of that, my little one, he was like around 1 at that time. He kept on getting really sick. He was going to daycare because I started to work after he was 3 months old. I went back to work. So while he was in daycare, he used to get a lot of viruses, and he was constantly sick. I mean, he was hospitalized, I think, right before his first birthday for like 2 or 3 days because he had a really bad upper respiratory infection. He was always on a nebulizer. So between the separation, between, you know, having a baby and him constantly getting sick, I was under a lot of emotional stress. So I decided to take family leave for 3 months. I decided to stay home because I kept on calling out because of my baby. He kept on getting sick. And that was like really tough. I was very depressed. I was questioning life. And as a believer, I kept on asking God, like, what's going on? I feel like the more I press into you, the more my life seems to be falling apart. And that was really the case. So while I was in the family leave, I was praying a lot. I was really leaning into God. And I remember asking him to give me something to cling on, because I was really in the borderline of kind of like just giving up on life. I was questioning everything. it was just a really hard time. So that's one of the things that I asked God for. I was like, give me something to cling on, give me something to believe in, because I life is too hard right now and I just really can't. Anyway, that was one of the prayers that I did. Now, I think it was February 8th of 2022 when I went back to work after 3 months that I took off to take care of my baby. The first day back to work, there was a medical student who also started her, I think it was a 6-week rotation where I was working at. I was working at New York Medical College at that point, in a family health center. And sometimes we would get students there during their rotation when they couldn't really find other places to put them in. So this girl, this medical student, she started the same day that I went back to work. I think it was February 8th, if I remember correctly. So the first day I'm back at work, I hear her talking to my boss, and they're having this conversation. She's like, yeah, I want to be a medical student or I want to be a doctor because I want to eventually move to Honduras, I believe was her story, so that I could work in a hospital giving help or providing healthcare to the underprivileged people of Honduras. And obviously that caught my ear right away, because I was thinking to myself, wow, out of all places in the world, why does she want to go to Honduras? Like, I was wondering if she was from Honduras, if she knew anybody in Honduras. Like, I was wondering what was her story. And I guess I should just add to the fact that she was Caucasian. She wasn't Hispanic at all. So that's kind of like what intrigued me even more. But they were having their conversation and I was just minding my business. It was my first day back at work. But as time went on, we kept on talking more and more. And I found out that she was actually a Christian, that she had actually done several missionary trips to Honduras. I think through her dad, who met someone that was from Honduras. I don't necessarily remember what was her story and how she ended up being in Honduras, but the point was that that's just where she ended up, like giving help to people in Honduras. And she's done a few missionary trips through her church, I believe, or maybe not her church. I don't remember 100%. But the point was that there was this girl here at my job talking about missionary trips. And she had a missionary trip coming up in June of the same year. Now, another little part of my story was that I went to Nyack College, which was a Christian school, and it's part of the Christian and Missionary Alliance denomination. And that part of the denomination, they really believe strongly in missionary trips. And as I went to college, I saw a lot of people who did missionary trips as well. And I always thought that that was really awesome, something to do, something to go help out other countries that, need the word or need service, whatever the case might be. But I never saw myself as doing a missionary trip, because I guess at that point I had 3/4 kids, and it just wasn't part of something that I ever saw myself doing. But as I got to know Lizzie, and the more that she was talking about this missionary trip, there was a little spark in my heart that I was just like, I would love to go back to Honduras and provide care to the underprivileged. But I don't know if that's something that will be in my books or in my life, because of everything else that was going on in my life at that point. But then there was this one time that we had a fire drill, right? And we all had to leave the building. It was still February/March, so it was still really cold. And Lizzie and I were just standing outside in the parking lot. And I was like, hey, do you want to go to my car to just sit in there and warm up? And she was like, yeah, sure. So when we went to my car, we kind of started talking more about the missionary trip. And she was like, maybe you really should come with me. And I was just like, Lizzie, I would love to do that, but I really don't think that that's something that it's in my cards at the moment or in my hands. And she was like, well, just pray about it, think about it. And that's when I kind of started realizing that she was like a Christian. And that part just even added more to to the whole missionary desire for me. So I went home, kind of prayed about it, and then I was just thinking to myself, I really want to do this. So let me ask my husband at that time how he feels about me going to Honduras for a whole week, and him staying home alone with the kids. And so I asked him, and even though we were going through a divorce, even though we were going through a really hard time, he was on board 100%. He was like, "Yeah, actually, I think that would be so like good for you. So, go ahead and go." And I was just like, "Oh my gosh, this is crazy." So then my next step was to ask my boss, and I was so afraid to ask her to take a week off in June because I had just come back from like a 3-month leave to take care of my kids. So I was afraid to ask. I was afraid to lose my job. But I went ahead and I asked her, and she was like, 100%, Madi, you could go ahead, take your week. And that was another amazing moment. Then I asked my mom that, if I was to go for a week, we should be able to help with the older kids. And she was like, hey, of course, 100%. So everything started aligning for me to be able to go on this missionary trip. And lo and behold, within a few weeks, I had booked the tickets. I had my time off was approved at work. Everything was just ready for me to go. And to me, that alone was just like an unbelievable thing. This was kind of like an answered prayer, because I was asking God that I needed something to like cling on to, something to give me purpose or like joy or like whatever the case might be. And the first day back at work, there's this girl that going on a missionary trip to Honduras, out of all places too, right? Anyway, so here we are in June. I think it was like June 7th or 8th when we ended up flying to Honduras. It was like a 20-hour trip. I think we had to take like 3 planes. It was just crazy to get there. And while I was there, that's when I had that encounter with the 14-year-old girl, where I really felt like this is what I want to do. Like, I want to help people out, because I saw myself in this girl and what she's been through. And I was thinking to myself, like, she probably is growing up in an abusive household, and this is how she ended up being pregnant at 14. Like, all these thoughts, right, were just coming to mind. But the most amazing and memorable part of that trip happened on June 12th of 2022. That was a Sunday, and it was like right before, I think we were planning on heading out. I think Monday or Tuesday we were coming back to the United States. We all sat, all the other missionary people, I think they were from Lee University, in the common area, and we had a church service. Now, because we were in Honduras, we didn't actually have a pastor there, or we didn't go to a church, but we sat in the common area, and they put on TV the live sermon series of a church in Tennessee, or I don't remember what state it was in, right? So we're there, we're sitting, and the sermon was on Psalm 139. So once Psalm 139, this specific Bible verse reads, this is 139 verse 14. Verse 13, I'm sorry. For you formed my inward parts. You covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works, and that my soul knows very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret and skillfully brought into the lowest part of the earth. Your eyes saw my substance being yet unformed, and in your book they were all written, the days fashioned for me, when as yet there were none of them. Right? That pastor preached on Psalm 139, and this Bible verse is probably one of the most famous Christian Bible verses, because it talks about our purpose. It talks about what we were created for. It talks about how God knew who we were before we were even created, right? And listening to this Bible verse saying that you covered me in my mother's womb, right? I don't know if any of you know, but those of you that know me close, June 12th is my actual birthday. It's when I was born. So here it was in June 12th, 2022, in Honduras, the place where most of the abuse that has taken place in my life also took place, right? And I'm hearing this message of God. So I closed my eyes and I was thinking to myself, I cannot believe that many years later, after everything I went through in my childhood, after everything that I went through in my adulthood, after everything that I'm going through right now through this divorce, God is talking to me and he's speaking breath. His word is speaking breath into my life, telling me, Mari, I knew you from the time that you were born. I knew you from the time that you were formed in your mother's womb. I knew, and I was there with you while you were going through everything that you were going through in your childhood. And now as an adult, the more you seek me, the more purpose I'm giving to you, the more I'm going to redeem who you are and everything that you went through. And sitting there amongst all these believers, worshiping God and listening to his word, and God speaking Psalm 139 right into my life on my birthday, out of all the times and out of all the places, which is Honduras, it was completely unreal and surreal to me. I felt so seen by God. I felt so loved by God. And this is like exactly what I needed. When I asked God that I needed something to cling on to help me believe that there was more to this life than the suffering and everything that I've been through, this was it. Like, that trip transformed me in ways that I can't even speak. And every time I read this Bible verse from now on, I could feel God speaking it directly to me, because he did that day on June 12th of 2022. And I'll never be the same. I will never be the same after that. So after that day, like I said, I was never the same. I ended up coming back to the United States. Like I said before, I was going through a divorce. My divorce was finalized, I think like a year or a year and a half later. Things were still really hard for me emotionally. And no matter how hard things got, I always go back to that day where God was talking to me and telling me that, you are redeemed and I'm with you. And I was with you ever since you were your mother's womb, and I've been with you even through all of that. And the desire for me to open up a nonprofit and just do more for women who have lived in the same situations that I have lived, like tripled and quadrupled by like 100,000. And it's taken me a few years of a little bit more healing, a little bit more working emotionally on myself to get to this point where I feel like I've learned enough to be able to start this nonprofit, to be able to help other women feel loved and worthy, and for them to feel like whatever they went through in their childhood or like young adulthood, living the effects of an abusive childhood, like does not define who they are, and they could overcome anything that they lived through, and they could be the better version of themselves, and they don't have to carry that pain, they don't have to carry that burden of what happened to them, because it wasn't their fault. So I hope that you guys are able to see that desire, and I'm going to continue making videos when I can, if life doesn't get too hectic, just continue to share more stories of how God has been so faithful and so loving, and how seen I've felt with him. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.